in Genesis chapter 24 tonight, and believe it or not, we are going to finish up Genesis chapter 24 tonight. I think this is our third or fourth Wednesday night in this great book. And as I had said earlier, you know, we're just taking it verse by verse. And sometimes when you take a book verse by verse, maybe you don't hit the particular topic or subject that somebody might like, but you just keep holding on, and somewhere along the line, it usually gets around to all of us. But when we preach the whole counsel of the Word of God, then that's what we mean. We want to preach the whole counsel, so we don't go skipping large sections of the Scripture, but want indeed to preach them all. Now I'm going to invite you to stand with me. We are not going to read 60 verses of this passage tonight, just in case you were wondering, but we're going to read part of it. So we're going to begin with verse number 1. And you can stand, and if you feel like at some point you need to sit down, then please feel free to do so. In fact, we are going to read through 21 verses, but if somewhere along the way you just feel like, hey, I just can't make it, then don't feel bad about sitting down. So let's begin with verse 1. Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who was in charge of all that he owned, please place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, and had been living there for decades. But you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. The servant said to him, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came from? Then Abraham said to him, beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. He will send his angel ahead of you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine, only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and went out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand. So he set out and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water when it was evening, the time when women go out to draw water. It does not say that their women went out to cut the grass, but we could just put that in there if we wanted to. Verse 12. And he said, Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I'm standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now it may be, or rather, now may it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, drink, and I will water your camels also. May she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. And it came about, before he had finished speaking, that behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The young woman was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had had relations with her. She went down to the spring, filled her jar, and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she said, "Drink, my lord." Then she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now, when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will also draw water for your camels until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was taking a close look at her in silence to find out whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. You may be seated. In Genesis 22, we saw that Isaac caught the faith of his father Abraham. Now in chapter 24, we see another great display of faith, which was also learned from Abraham. C.H. Spurgeon wrote these words, "Though grace does not run in the blood, and regeneration is not of the blood nor physical birth, yet it doth frequently happen that God, by means of one of a household, draws the rest to himself. He calls an individual, and then he uses him to be a sort of spiritual decoy to bring the rest of the family into the gospel net." Well, these verses before us tonight demonstrate that Abraham had taught his servant the need to bathe every action in prayer. Now, there is no doubt that each step of the way was marked by fervent supplication for divine leadership. As the servant went along, I believe he was constantly speaking to the Lord. And that's not a bad habit to be in, that when you find yourself going from one place to another, and if you were alone, you can spend time talking to the Lord. You can carry on a conversation with God. I believe that this man, Abraham's servant, probably began each day in prayer, and he ended each day with prayer as well. I want you to notice, though, that as he prayed, he kept traveling. He did not use prayer as an excuse for idleness. He prayed and he worked at the same time. Prayer does not make work unnecessary, but it is necessary to make work effective. Now check out verse 14 again. "Now may it be that the young woman to whom I say, 'Please let down your jar so that I may drink,' and who answers, 'Drink, and I will water your camels also,' may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master." Now, why do you suppose that Abraham's servant asked for this sign in particular? I mean, was this not an unreasonable request? Drawing enough water, not only for the men, but also for 10 large camels. If she took the initiative without grumbling, then it would demonstrate 3 personal characteristics. Here's the first. She possessed a willingness to go the second mile. And you know what's pretty amazing here is there was no grumbling. There was no, "Okay, I guess I'll do it." Did you ever, growing up, did you ever do what was requested of you, but you did it grumbling and complaining? Anybody ever do that? Did you have children who would do that? "Take out the garbage." "Okay, I'll take it out, but I ain't gonna like it." So there are lots of things that we do, but we do it complaining and grumbling and murmuring. Here we find Rebekah with this willingness to go the second mile and not grumbling or complaining. 2, it would show that she had a sensitivity to the needs of other people. Many are they who, even passing someone in the hallway, passing someone on the street, are in their own little world and never notice the needs of the people around them. This woman, whoever she might be, would qualify if she had a sensitivity to the needs of other people. She thought of others as opposed to thinking about herself. And then 3, this would demonstrate that she would give herself to serve others though it meant hardship. Now, it's okay with a lot of us to serve others if it doesn't take long and it's not a lot of work. If we don't have to break a sweat. I'll sort of kind of help out. However, she, in that moment, took on her shoulders the hardship of serving not only Abraham's servant and his men, but these camels. Now let me sort of cross the bridge for a minute and say how important it is to know these characteristics are present prior to entering a lifelong contract of marriage. How many of you have ever said love is 50-50? Anybody ever said that? Love is 50-50? You ever heard it? We got one person who's actually said it. Oh, we got 2 people who've actually said it. Yeah, love is 50-50. That's one of the biggest lies ever to come out of the pit of hell. I'm preaching here. Love, successful marriages are not 50-50. They are 100-100. Even it is 100 on the part of one if it's none on the part of the other. In the best marriages, the partners are not looking to be made happy. And don't most people get married because they want to be happy? Isn't that why you got married? How long did it take before you discovered that was an illusion? Anybody? The partners in the best marriages are not looking to be made happy. Rather, they are looking to live for the highest success of their mate. You don't get married so this other person can serve you. You get married for the purpose of serving them, that is, living for their highest success. Now let me ask a few questions at this juncture. And although I'm going to be stating it as a potentiality, I think that it is, I think you'll get the idea and you can draw it down to a more personal level. Here's the first question. How often does your potential spouse, now, and just take out potential if you want to, how often does your potential spouse talk about God?
Every day.
I am preaching here. Are y'all everybody just keeps jumping in here. That's okay, I'm kidding. And these are actually rhetoricals. How often, now, let's just say you're dating. Let's just say Dan and, what's your name again?
Donna.
Let's just say Dan and Donna are dating. And so you just have to, and just ponder this question. How often did Dan talk about God? I mean, he wasn't surrendered to ministry, was he, when you guys met, Donna? No, he wasn't surrendered to ministry. Wasn't thinking about ministry, right? And so how often does your potential spouse or your spouse talk about God? Here's question number 2. Does he or she talk about God naturally and comfortably? People who talk about God naturally and comfortably, you know what? There is a reason for that. If a potential spouse starts sputtering when the subject of God comes up or tries quickly to run away from such talk, do you think that is the person for you?
No.
We need to distribute some masks. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right, here's question 3. Are you ready? How often does your potential spouse talk of goals and directions? Where do they see themselves headed? 4. Does he or she seem to have any decipherable idea of a life path? Here's question number 5. How often does your potential spouse talk about others? Now, before you answer that, we're going to run in question number 6 right on top of it. Here it is. In what sense does he or she talk about others? Now that's where these questions take on quite a bit more of a personal ambiance. Here's number 7, and this may be the biggest of all. How often does your potential spouse talk about self? And number 8, in what sense does he or she talk about self? Now, I do not know about you, but I think that these 8 questions would be a great way to examine where a husband and wife happen to be, even if they've been married for decades. Would you agree with this? Check out verse 15 again. It came about before he had finished speaking that, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. Now this has to be tied directly to Matthew 6:8, where Jesus said, your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. Indeed, God always supplies the need before we are even aware of the need. Before he had finished speaking, Moses wrote, behold, Rebekah came out. Now, many of you have probably heard this story before, but just because it fits in so beautifully here, I want to, some others will hear this for the first time, and some just, snooze for the next couple of minutes, and then we'll wake you up when we're ready to move on. I was single, 24 years of age, had graduated from college. I was already in my first ministry as what they called back then a minister of music, youth, and recreation. I wore 3 major hats, and I had been in ministry as a single person for about 18 months. In the latter half of 1977, I began to feel the need for a companion, not just someone to date, but I just began to sense this profound loneliness down in my soul. And I remember on October the 9th, it's a Monday morning, October the 9th, 1977, I walked into the library of our church. As a youth pastor, I had the permission back then to wear jeans, t-shirts, and baseball hats, which I had on. I walked into the church library. I threw that hat on the floor. I can see it happening just as it's happened just a few moments ago. I threw that hat on the floor and I said, Lord, I'm willing to stay single the rest of my life. But you've got to do something about this void on the inside. The day before That was on Sunday, the 8th of October. The day before, a girl, Dana Patterson, whom I knew in college, she and I dated briefly in college. And she happened to be attending that Sunday afternoon a recreational football league, which we were a part of, a flag football league. And as a pastor of recreation, we did a lot of things recreationally. So we had a lot of young men, and I was out there with them. I played with them. And so Dana was out there. And after we had finished playing, Dana came up to me and she said, "I've got someone I would like for you to go out with." And I said, "Well, now, folks, I shouldn't even tell you this, but I was just kidding, but it's just typical me." And I said, "Well, sure, I'll give her a break." So she went immediately out to Donna's parents' house, where she was staying that afternoon. Donna had a young son, which I did not know anything about for some time. Well, actually, I didn't know about him for about 24 hours. Anyway, she went out there and she said, "I got somebody I want you to go out with. His name is John Connell." You know what Donna said? "No way, no how." There she is calling now. No way, no how, because I'd never met her. I'd never seen her. She saw me in a Shoney sometime, I don't know, and she said, "I had my head up in the air and I was, I don't know. How blind can you be?" Anyway, she said, "I'm not going out with him." Dana said, "You got to go out with him. I've already told him you got to go out with him." She said, "Well, okay, if you and your husband Don will double date with us on Friday night, then okay, we'll go." All right, great. So Monday rolls around. I'm in the library with that brief prayer, throwing my hat around. Somebody answer Donna's phone, please. She just keeps calling. And that night about 9 o'clock, I said, I do not know what this woman looks like. And you remember that commercial that said, "Don't drive no ugly truck"? You remember that commercial way back? I think Ford had that commercial. Now we're going back to the 70s. And I had that same kind of philosophy: don't date no ugly girl. That was sort of, and I said, I need to check this woman out. Look, I'm a young guy. I'm not the suave, debonair, mature man I am now. And I said, I need to know what this woman looks like before I'm out in public with her on Friday night. So I called her up on the phone. It's about 9 o'clock. I introduced myself, told her who I was, and I said, "I'd like to come over and pick you up and take you out. Maybe we'll go get a Coke or something like that." And she wanted to get a beer, but I wouldn't take her to. No, she didn't want to get a beer. I'm just kidding. And so she said, and I said, well, why can't you go? And she said, "Well, because Trey's sleeping." And I said, "Who is Trey?" And she said, "He is my son." Well, of course, Donna had been married before. Her husband in 1976 was killed in an industrial explosion at the Reynolds Metals plant in Sheffield, Alabama. I'd heard about it on the radio, but that's the last time I'd ever thought about it. And Trey was born in July. His daddy, Donna's first husband, was killed in October, just 3 months or so after his birth. And for the first time in my life, I just didn't know what to say. What do you say? And so Donna felt bad for me. And she said, "Why don't you come over? We'll break open a can of Shasta." Now, Shasta used to be the poor man's Coke. Back in the 70s, you could buy a can of Shasta Cola for 10 cents a can. And that's all guys like me could afford. That's what we drank. And she said, "Come on over, we'll break open a can of Shasta." So I did go over. And I stayed there till about midnight. And then I invited her to lunch the next day. And then I saw her the next day. And I saw her the next day. And I saw her the next day until 2 weeks later I asked her to marry me. And she turned me down. I mean, you talk about a guy's ego just taking it in the... Oh, why did you put that up there? I am going to smack you. I did not look like that way back then. I mean, I'm just telling you, back in the 70s, I did not look like that. Listen, we were cutting her pay. I can tell you that. It's at any rate, here's what I want you to see, which goes along with this passage. By the way, she did change her mind. We met and married in 6 weeks. Met on October the 10th, married on November the 23rd. Christmas Eve, after choir rehearsal. At any rate, I prayed that prayer on Monday. God had already answered on Sunday. Do you see? God knows what we need before we ask it.
Praise the Lord.
Now let me share something with you. When we are guided by God at every juncture, no need will go unmet. We're not to that slide yet. Oftentimes, though, we come to God only after the need has arisen, or our need is but a perceived need as opposed to a real need. We all think we need all kinds of things that we don't need. Well, apparently this had become a real need with me. The prayer went up on Monday. God had answered it the day before. I just didn't know it till then. Verse 16 tells us that Rebekah had great outward beauty, yet we will soon discover that her inward beauty was greater still. In fact, it was her inward beauty that qualified her to be Isaac's wife. Abraham's servant did not ask for physical endowment, but spiritual. How wise he was. When we are willing to follow God's path explicitly, then He often grants us a double measure. This is precisely what God did for Solomon when he asked for wisdom. He asked for the best gift, and God not only gave him the best of the gifts, but also the rest of the gifts. The things he did not ask for. Notice that one of the first things we're told about Rebekah is that she had kept herself sexually pure. Verse 16 tells us that not only was Rebekah beautiful, but that she was a virgin. Now, our modern culture just sort of mocks at such a characteristic, even to the point of ridicule. However, God places sexual purity at the top of the list. Why? I think 2 reasons. What do you think they are? Here's what I think. Number 1, sexual purity enables you to give 100% of yourself to your spouse. Every time a person has sexual relationships with another person that is part of their life, they cannot give to anybody else. That is a little piece of them that has been given away that can never belong to the spouse. Ever. Second, sexual purity enables a person to have 100% confidence in their mate. And in fact, the older you grow, the more precious is this confidence. You never have to look at your mate and say, I wonder how many you were with before me. It doesn't seem to matter a whole lot when we're young, but man, it matters a whole lot when we grow older. Check out verses 17 and 18. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. Then she quickly lowered her jar to the ground, to her hand, and gave him a drink. Take note of Rebekah's swiftness in placing the needs of others ahead of herself. She did not wait to be asked to fulfill the entire need. She volunteered it. Have you ever know somebody that you knew was in need and you said, well, what can I do for you? And they said, nothing. But if you had just gone on after seeing the need and met the need, they would have been greatly blessed. Do you think it's true that when most of us say, what can I do for you, we really don't mean it? We are hoping somebody, they say, oh, I'm good, everything's good. Did you ever hope that? You know, you want to seem magnanimous. What can I do for you? How can I help you? And we really hope they say nothing. But here is Rebekah, who is meeting the entire need before she is asked. Check out verses 19 and 20. Now when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will also draw water for your camels until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all camels. Now let me show you something. Notice how far Rebekah was willing to go to serve others. One camel would usually drink up to 20 gallons. There were at least 10 camels in the servant's entourage. 200 gallons. Or 400 gallons, at 20. That'd be 400 gallons. Can you imagine how long it would take using one of those ancient pots that you carry on your head to bring up water before you reach 400 gallons? Not even to speak about her own sheep or own household that she was gathering water for as well. Not only that, she had to run back and forth to the well, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is even more significant when we acknowledge that she did not even know this man. Perhaps Jesus had this thought in his mind when he said, if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Even the tax collectors, do they not do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Even the Gentiles, people without God, do they not do the same? Her action becomes even more significant still because she initiated the action. We are seeing rare qualities at work. Look at verse 21. Meanwhile, the man was taking a close look at her in silence to find out whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. Two things here. One, Abraham's servant expected his prayers to be answered in the affirmative. And if we are taught anything about prayer, we are taught that those who expect and who do not expect and who doubt, their prayers are not going to come to pass. Two, Abraham's servant settled for nothing less than the best. And God brought it about. Even in seeking or desiring a human partner, we are to stand firm in the fact that God is our divine partner already. Psalm 34:7 tells us that God will in fact order our steps if we stay out of his way and let him order them. Again, it is not our responsibility to find a mate. It is God's responsibility to bring that mate toward us. We may feel the need, a genuine need, but even then, it's God's responsibility to bring this person to us. Well, let's make a long story short. Follow along as I read verses 22 through 33. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel, 2 bracelets for her wrist weighing 10 shekels in gold. And he said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to stay overnight at your father's house?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, Milcah's son, whom she bore to Nahor." Again she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed and room to stay overnight." Then the man bowed low and worshiped the Lord. And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and his trustworthiness toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers." Then the young woman ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. We're going to see Uncle Laban again. And Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrist, now what do you think was important to him? And when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah say, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring, and he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house. Then Laban, you're going to learn not to like him, okay? But I mean, we're just being introduced to him right now. Then Laban unloaded the camels. He had an ulterior motive for all this. He gave straw and feed to the camels and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. But when food was set before him to eat, he said, "I will not eat until I've stated my business." And he said, "Speak on." Now jump to verse 49. "So now if you're going to deal kindly and truthfully with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me now, so that I may turn to the right or to the left." Then Laban and Bethuel replied, "The matter has come from the Lord." Well, they just liked all the wealth that they saw. And we see dollar signs and we say, God's got to be in it. The matter's come from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son. Now remember, these guys that we're talking to that are associated with Rebekah, they are all relatives of Abraham. It's not like they hadn't heard about each other, not like they didn't know each other, they did. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her, go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. In verse 51, God makes the servant's way successful. Now look at verses 53 through 59. And the servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they got up in the morning, he said, "Send me away to my master." But her brother, who is her brother? Laban. Remember that name? Did I say remember that name? But her brother and mother said, "Oh, let the young woman stay with us for a few days. Say 10. Afterward, she may go." Verse 56, however, Abraham's servant said to them, "Do not delay me. Since the Lord has prospered my way, send me away so that I may go to my master." And they said, "We will call the young woman and ask her." What a novel idea. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" Get ready, get ready. Here it is. And she said, "I will go." So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse. I never had one of those. With Abraham's servant and his men. And let me tell you what we discover here. We discover one of Rebekah's most outstanding traits. Are you listening? It is a trait that puts her in the true spiritual line of Abraham. What is that characteristic? Rebekah displayed a willingness to walk by faith. She was not only willing to leave home, but this was a permanent parting. She would never see her family again. Not only that, she would have to cross, literally, a huge span of desert. Now, I don't want you to miss this. God had a new direction for Rebekah, and she responded without hesitation. See, 10 days could have turned into 10 weeks, and 10 weeks could have turned into 10 months. And 10 months could have turned into 10 years, and 10 years into a lifetime. As a result, God's best would have been missed. Now, is Rebekah not an example for us, both as a church and as individuals? We enter by faith and agree to go with God above all else, wherever it is and whatever it is. The words, "I will never do this" or "never go there," enter the mind of the person who is following Christ. Immediately after receiving a word from God, she went. No hesitation. Now look at verse 65. She said to the servant, and of course they're journeying back, okay? They're back down into Canaan. She said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." And at this point, he's talking about Isaac. Then she took her veil and covered herself. The best word for Rebekah's action is mystery. It is said, and I believe it's true, that modesty is a woman's greatest power. Never give up that power in an effort to gain popularity or success. Ladies, are you listening to me? I can tell you what men want. They want your body, married to you or not. Old, young, men in between. That's what they want. I've suggested to some girls, if your boyfriend says, "If you really love me, you'll have sex with me," why don't you say to him, "If you really love me, you'll stick your head in our gas oven and turn on the gas." It's just a ruse. It's just a ruse. Do you understand that? There's no mystery anymore. There's not even any mystery in the way many women dress today. And you give most men encouragement, I can tell you what they're thinking about. I can just tell you. Now, I hadn't been out taking a poll, but I'm told that most men have a sexual thought every 11 seconds. Now, I got that beat, man. I'm up to 14 seconds. I've just gone way up, just way up. Once the mystery is gone, most guys are looking for more mystery. Never give up the power of mystery in an effort to gain popularity or acceptance. And if a guy will not wait, or if a girl will not wait, listen, this is a whole different world than the one which I grew up in. In this world, it's not boys calling girls, it's girls calling the boys. Now let's sum up the takeaways we're going to be done. Number one, are you with me? Pray, pray, pray. Number two, pray, but keep working. 3, pray and trust God's involvement in your life. Here's number 4. Pray and trust God's involvement in every area of your life. Do you get this? God is interested in every facet of your life. And He wants us to have the best. And if we will do it His way, He will not only bring us the best, are you hearing me? He'll bring us the rest. I don't know about you, but I can honestly say God not only gave me the best, but the rest. Let's pray together. Now, Lord, this is your time. It's amazing what we learn in your word, what we discern from your word, how the Spirit just comes upon us and digs out all of those magnificent nuggets. And Lord, when they are applied to our lives, they enrich us immeasurably. And this is truly a refreshing story in the saga of Genesis. Other refreshing moments, to be sure. But this is one of the most refreshing. We don't normally talk much about it. But yet when we look at it, when we study it, it just amazes us. And thank you for the insights. Thank you for applying it to our lives. And for those of us who may be single, if there's a need for companionship, then Lord, I pray they will take all of this into consideration. And even for those of us who are married, that we will sort of check our relationship with our spouse and see how we're doing. Because indeed, perhaps it can be better. And when it becomes better, it becomes best. And then the rest. Do something special here tonight in our hearts and in our minds. And may those who watch this on the internet in the near future be just as blessed and find themselves moving quickly to do things your way. And what we ask in the name of Jesus Christ. Now, would you